Hello and welcome. This is our second in the Complete Dancer Project talks. Today we're going to be talking about all things strength and conditioning for Irish dancers. My name's Scott Murphy. I'm a clinical specialist sports physiotherapist based in Limerick. We'll start off with what we're going to cover today, and hopefully we'll get through in about an hour or so, give or take. Obviously, if you've got any questions, fire them on. What we're going to have a look at today is, first of all, who am I, what am I about, what have I done before, what's my take on Irish dancing. We're going to have a bit of a chat about this concept of optimal training for dance performance. And the real important thing is optimal training and performance is the key for mine. We're going to have a chat about injury prevention and injury rehabilitation. We're going to have a little bit of a whistle-stop tour through lower limb anatomy. We're not going to go into great detail with this, but it's important when we start talking about the exercise component to things later on, is that you've got an understanding of what I'm talking about in terms of anatomy. We're going to go through some strength and conditioning principles across the life stage, and particularly looking at younger athletes, what aspects of strength and conditioning they benefit from most within different stages of their life, particularly when we start talking about growth and puberty and things like that. We're going to have a very quick chat about load. Roshin's covered it in the first talk, and she's going to go into it in great depth in the third talk. But I will touch on it a little bit today, purely because strength and conditioning is an additional load to what you guys are going to be doing with regards to dance. And we're going to have a bit of a go with some exercise. So if you've got some space around the place, clear it out. You're going to be moving a bit. I've got a big old list of exercises that we're going to attack some of. My main rationale is to get you to understand why we'd be doing these exercises. The exercises themselves, again, there's a lot of reasoning behind why they're getting done. Most of them you'll have seen before. There's nothing that's particularly out of the box, but what it looks at is balancing your athlete out as much as possible. So, who am I? I'm not from around here. That's home for me. That's Manly Beach. I moved over to Limerick and Ireland in 2005, so I'm here 15 years. And after the last couple of days of glorious weather, I'd be tempted to stay a little bit longer. I'm a physiotherapist and a sports scientist. All of my training was done in Australia. Throughout my career, I've been very, very fortunate in that I've been able to see some pretty cool athletes both train and perform. I've been able to work with the Irish boxing team during what was, I suppose, the genesis of the high performance setup. So we actually worked out what high performance meant, and that culminated in 2 Olympic Games with them, Beijing, and I suppose the ultimate for us was London, where we came away with a lot of medals. I've worked likewise with high performance swimmers, high performance rowers, and at the moment I work with Mitchelton Scott professional cycling team, so I get to go to cool races like the Tour de France and things like that. I tell you that more so than anything to give you an idea of where I'm coming from when I'm looking at Irish dancers. I've worked with some really cool athletes that perform at the absolute highest levels. That is where I hold Irish dancers in that degree of sort of upper echelon of human performance. I am not a dancer. I have no dance background other than the occasional bit of nightclub work with some social lubricant on board. I may offend some people in this, purely because I'm coming at what we're talking about today from a different perspective. Having said that, I'm also looking at through the filter and the lens of Irish dance. I've spent a lot of years over here. I've spent a lot of time talking to Roisin, and I've seen a lot of Irish dancers now that I understand what you guys are doing. I understand the training that's involved. I understand the complexity of Irish dance. I understand how hard Irish dance is without having strapped a shoe on. So I've got all the book smarts, I've got all the experience, but I have not strapped a shoe on. And if you will see my feet later on and you'll realise why. But I think what I can bring is other experience from other sports that have probably looked at coaching and physical preparation on a bit more of a scientific scale, and also from just a longer time frame. As Roisin highlighted in her talk, the rate of acceleration in athletic performance in Irish dancing has absolutely exploded recently. The things that I see kids do now amazes me. And having looked at past videos of not that long ago, and again, this is where teachers sometimes get caught in that's where they will have danced and that's what they will have seen. So in terms of what a dancer previously could tolerate versus what they're being asked to do now, sometimes there is a bit of a mismatch. Looking at this idea of optimal training for dance performance, as I've said, Irish dancers are amazing athletes. Yes, there's an aesthetic component to it and there's an artistic component to it, but when push comes to shove, Irish dancers are athletes, and they are super athletes. In terms of physiological requirements, you'd kind of equate them to an 800 metre runner in terms of they have to work as fast and as hard as they can for about 90 seconds. The 800 metre runner doesn't have to do it with crystals and a wig and fake tan though. The other thing that I've picked up with Irish dance is that no athlete I've ever worked with works as hard at the same age. The only athletes that I could possibly equate to in some way to come near the time and the work that young Irish dancers put into swimmers. Biggest difference that I see between swimmers and dancers is that the water does a lot of the work. Water holds the weight of the swimmer, whereas a dancer is jumping and pounding their legs on the ground and their feet on the ground thousands and thousands of times for a very long period of time. If you take a 12-year-old Irish dancer and look at the work they're putting in and compare them against a 12-year-old rugby player, 12-year-old rugby player might run around for 2 one-hour training sessions a week in a 60-minute game, if they're lucky. An Irish dancer isn't even warmed up in that time. So, coming from a background of elite sport, working with professional athletes, with athletes that are at the very top of their game on a world stage, I would put Irish dancers in that sort of an echelon. And that is in no way trying to plamorse anyone in the Irish dance community. You guys work really hard, and I take my hat off to you. Very good friend of mine, Lars Hummer, who is a New Zealand swimming coach and has recently been awarded the best swimming coach in the country, and he's the now lead national coach, always says that good athletes make good people. And I firmly believe that, in that the discipline, the dedication, the respect for hard work that athletes have tends to make them pretty good when they get older and they grow up. From a physio perspective, I'll take that saying and sort of mix with it a little bit in that I'll say that good people make good athletes, in that if I can get someone as a person, a normal 10, 11-year-old kid that can function as a normal 10 or 11-year-old kid well first, then I'll make them a good dancer. I will say this to every dancer that I work with, is that your dancing is really cool, but you are currently a 10-year-old kid that is in pain. And that is my primary responsibility. And that's where I'll happily play the baddie. With teachers, sometimes we do need to back kids off, and that's okay. For me, I'll always sell the idea of being bigger, stronger, better to a patient, be it a dancer, be it a swimmer, be it anyone, in that you are here now with me because you're injured. You're injured because your body could not tolerate the load that was put on it. We can stop and rest and things will go away. But as soon as that load gets put on you again, you will break again. So if we can make you bigger, stronger, better, we will make you a better athlete. Therefore, you're less likely to get injured. It's a way easier sell. If you tell someone they're going to be better at something, they'll walk through a wall for you. So it makes my life easier in that regard. Something that is, and I hope that last part, movement skills, works out. I can't see where my video is in the screen, but I'm hoping it's okay. This is a very, very basic long-term athletic development triangle that you'll pick up in any coaching book. And for teachers that are watching this and listening to this, I will always put a dance teacher as a coach. At the end of the day, you guys are working on improving technical proficiency and physiological adaptation. That's what a coach does. So in terms of, you've also got to worry about the aesthetics of things and dresses and hair and all that sort of stuff. So your life's actually harder than most coaches. But the core of any long-term athletic development is around giving an athlete a broad movement skill base. And then you build with power, speed and agility, and then you work sport specific. So that really, really wide movement skill base to start with, and this is basic fundamental skills, and we'll talk about this once we start going through lifespan stuff. But as Roshi mentioned in your talk last week, there's an enormous amount of research that's come out now saying that athletes that specialise before about 14 or 15 or something like that end up more injured more quickly, just because they don't have that broad movement literacy and broad movement skill base to fall back on when they start to come under the pump from an increase in load. This is something that I come across frequently within the dance community, is that optimal training does not equal maximal training. The adage of some is good, more is better is unfortunately still very prevalent within the Irish dance community. Told you I was going to offend you. And this doesn't work. It works for some people. And another big thing I'll push through the whole way through here is that we are working with individuals. Again, from a coaching perspective, you have a squad of people. It is very difficult to tailor every program or every class to every person in the class. The difficulty is, as a coach, you have to do that. You have your core group of stuff. The adage of we keep going until either they turn the lights off on us, bingo comes in, or parents start knocking the door down cannot work. I've been told we've always done it this way before, and I completely respect that, but there is also a very large pile of broken dancers as a result. Yes, you have to work hard, but you have to be smart with it. You have to plan this stuff. You have to, as Roisin will talk next time about periodization, planning rest, planning when we increase load in people, planning when we bring load down on guys. Give people an opportunity to supercompensate. I've had conversations with teachers in the past and with parents and with dancers that the closer we get to a major competition, the more dancing we do. And we'll have a look at a little bit of a graph later on, and hopefully we'll be able to change people's minds about this sort of stuff. The really, really simple adage that we use in sport the whole time: if you can't train, you can't perform. Which means two things. If you're injured, you can't dance in a class, then you can't go and compete. But also on a far more fundamental level, if you can't train, you can't perform. So if someone's broken or injured, then they're not going to perform. Putting down consistent training over a prolonged period of time is what improves performance. Getting someone who's come back from an injury and trying to play catch up will almost guarantee you future injury and most certainly guarantee poor performance. Any training that's missed is gone. If we're lucky, we're able to work with an injured athlete to build back to where they were, or while they were injured, we're able to maintain as much fitness and strength as we possibly can. Looking at injury prevention, this is the kind of the sad part of the story. It's a harder sell generally, telling athletes to, if you do these exercises, you're less likely to get injured. Well, I'm not injured now, so why would I try that? I'm busy doing stuff. Okay, fair enough. People will learn the hard way that way. The other thing with injury prevention is it's not possible. I am not sitting here on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with a helicopter parked out the front. If I could prevent injury, I would be the richest man alive. So we can reduce the modifiable risk factors that Roisin spoke about in her first talk. We cannot prevent injury. We can reduce the likelihood, but we can't prevent it. The thing we're looking at in terms of injury is exposure and tolerance to load. So if you are, and I apologise for some of the Irish dance pictures, this is where I show that I'm not a dancer, but if you walk around in very small shoes, on your toes, and jump around a lot, the likelihood of you injuring your ankle gets higher the more you do it. If you have particularly weak feet and ankles, so your tolerance to that load is lower, or you've had time off away from being exposed to this stuff, the likelihood of you getting injured goes up. So our aim is to build robust athletes. What a robust athlete looks like is many and varied. All these guys are some of the top athletes in the world at varying different sports, and they do not look the same. Again, this is where we start talking about the individual and what we can do with the individual. Making a robust 10-year-old looks very different to a robust 12-year-old to a very robust 16-year-old. There are different stages of life. A very robust 10-year-old who's 4 foot nothing versus a 16-year-old 6'2" athlete that was the 4 foot kid 2 years ago. They're totally different human beings, and the load we put through them and the work we put into them has to be different. Very small note on rehabilitation. I've probably been a bit harsh on dancers here. I think a lot of athletes under-rehabilitate. There's some recent research coming out from Australia looking at Aussie rules players. These are full-time professional guys that with hamstring injuries, and they found that the average return to play time was about 3 weeks, and that's kind of a standard for a grade 1 hamstring strain. And what they found was that if you had a grade 1 hamstring strain, you came back in 3 weeks, that you were at an increased risk of injury for at least 15 weeks after that. Having passed all the return to play protocols, having been passed to be safe to go back and play, pain-free and everything like that, the likelihood of you re-injuring that hamstring again or the other side is escalated for at least 15 weeks. This is fairly new information. We used to talk about sort of 9 weeks onwards. These guys have put 15 weeks on it. So what that means is, and this is where it gets tough, as a physio, we probably don't hang on to people long enough, and it is difficult if you're looking on an injury prevention or a just get you back from an injury perspective to hang on to people for a very long time. If we're talking about the bigger, stronger, faster, harder person, then you can hang on to them a bit longer. If we're from the very outset saying, look, we need to make you stronger. To make you stronger, we need at least 6 weeks to do that. We're starting to buy some time. Doesn't mean you have to come and see me twice a week for 6 weeks, but it means you need to put some work into this for 6 weeks. We'll get you back dancing in 3, but we've got to put 6 into you. Look how strong you've got now in 6 weeks. I reckon we can get you stronger. Let's put another 6 weeks in. We've managed to get 12 weeks out of you. We reassess again. Look, you've made more gains. Let's go beyond that. And it becomes very, very quickly from a return to sport perspective to a performance enhancing perspective, and it's a lot easier, and it's far easier to get athletes to do things when you're making them better, when they're performing better, and they'll notice things when they're dancing are easier, they're jumping high, they're landing better, that sort of stuff. So it's from a, I suppose, a teacher physiotherapist relationship perspective, it would be really, really cool, and I'm not saying 10 people to me, but if the physios you work with get them to hang on to your people for longer. It's not that you're getting them there twice a week. It may be early on, you'll see them a couple of times. You may not see them then again for a month. It might be 6 weeks, come back and we'll reassess you and give you another program. And you step things out that way. But it's vital that we rehabilitate and take people beyond where they were before. Really, really important in that regard. Moving on to anatomy now. I'm going to move really quickly through this. So I strongly believe in the role of the hip within Irish dance is probably underplayed. Irish dancers tend to be very knee dominant, or Irish dance tends to be very knee dominant and quads dominant and things like that. And there's a couple of bits that I think are worth teasing out, particularly for the teachers amongst you, and to do with the actual anatomy of the hip. And it's kind of stuff we already know. So we all know that a hip joint is a ball and socket joint, which means it has, we call 6 degrees of freedom. So your leg can go forwards and backwards, it can go in, out, and it can rotate. And that rotation component is huge within Irish dance when you're looking at turnout and things like that. And a number of dancers that I will see, and I'll always ask, irrespective of what the problem is, and this isn't just with dancing, this is with any athlete that comes and sees me, what does your coach, what does your teacher say that you need to get better at? And it'll be, need to turn my feet out more. Okay, how do you turn your feet out? Well, I need to turn my hips out. Cool, that makes sense. And the connection is there. But you get someone fatigued, you get them doing something particularly complicated, and they need to turn, and they're being told, turn your feet out. If you're a hypermobile kid whose easy option, and this is not that the kid is being lazy, it is that the kid is being efficient. The human being will do the least energy consuming activity to get the end result. So if you're telling me to turn my feet out and I've got particularly flat floppy feet, I'll just squash my feet flat, or I'll rotate my knees, because it takes active external rotation of my hip to do that, and I'm really, really tired and it's hard. So in terms of cueing for people within class, you want them to turn their feet out, but by getting them to be foot focused, it will get them to change their movement at their feet, rather than what you actually want them to do is to turn their hips out. It's a small but I think very, very important concept that some of the exercises we're going to have a look at later on that we'll tease out a little bit better. Looking at a hip, you want to think of it like a seal balancing a ball on his nose. So there's big ball, big socket, but it does have those 6 degrees of freedom that are accessible at all times. So if you want to move your leg forwards and backwards, you have to control for your hip going in and out, and from rotating. There's a position that we call dynamic valgus, which is if you jump up and down, basically your knees knock together, your feet collapse and your knees knock together. That is an inability to control for your hip going in and out, and I'll show that when we get up to do some exercise, and an inability to externally rotate your hip. It's a stable position, it's just not a very good one to transmit force through. We'll have a look about that. So, but it's really important that if you're looking at this picture here, so ball and socket, and you're trying to jump up and down on that, you have to control for that moving forwards and backwards, which generally dancers are really, really good because they're landing on a straight leg. So stopping and you're not allowed to stick your bum out, you're not allowed to both bow forward. So it's easily correctable, and the dancer knows if they're doing that or not. In terms of the leg going in and out, I see lots and lots of dancers that are quite weak into abduction. So that ability to keep their pelvis level whilst they're bouncing up and down on one hip, and that pelvis isn't dropping down on the other side. And the rotation is the other thing we need to control for. Really, really complicated movement. And it's something we don't think about from this day to the next. The reasons why I think the hip is implicated in a lot of problems with what we see with dancers is the huge amounts of range of motion that it's capable of, the large degree or the large component of range of motion that Irish dancers use. So if you look at someone doing a high click or something like that and they're trying to kick themselves up in the face, that's massive amounts of hip flexion. We're then looking at extremes of external rotation to be in a turned out position, and then extreme extension if we're looking at the back leg on a birdie or something like that. I'm starting to pick up on my dance stuff. To look at the muscles around your hip, like with multiple layers of things, there's huge amounts of force generation with these muscles, but it's quite disparate and differing between sides, differing between movements. So for example, if we look at the most superficial muscle, so this is the back of someone's hip, muscles we all know about, glute max, big bum muscle basically, strongest muscle in our body, huge surface area, so it's a big muscle. Strength of a muscle is directly proportional to its cross-sectional area. So it makes sense. If you've got bigger muscles, you're stronger. But the muscles themselves are set up to be stronger. So glute max, big muscle. It extends your hip, so it kicks your leg back. So if you're thinking on the back leg of a birdie, it's going back that way. If we're looking at a squat or a standard land from a jump, that's a big muscle that absorbs a lot of load. In an Irish dancer, we're looking to get them to land, get people to land on pretty much a straight leg. So we don't want someone sticking their backside out when they land. It's down to your quads and your calves to take the majority of the load. So these guys are underpowered in that regard. So when we look at what's used a lot in dance, from a strength and conditioning perspective, we're looking at what's not used as well. Because there's no point having big gigantic calves and big gigantic quads and no backside, no hamstrings. For me, for the good person perspective. So to be a well-rounded normal human being, if you're going to have big quads, you know what, you're going to have big hamstrings and big glutes as well. Because you'll see me whether it's due to a dance injury or it's due to something else. And you look funny. Looking to the front of the hip here. Now there is one big muscle, a couple of big muscles that are missing off the front here, so your rectus femoris, one of your other hip flexors, but we've got pretty big muscles here, your psoas and your iliacus, and your tendons fasciolatus, a bit of a smaller guy, but their job is to pull that leg forward. And Irish dancers need very strong hip flexors to be able to kick up as high as they do. We'll talk with some exercises or with some conceptual stuff later on as well about owning the range of motion that you have. We'll move on to the side of the hip now. It's a muscle called gluteus minimus and gluteus medius. These are the muscles that pull your leg out to the side, abduct them. What they also do, if you switch their origin and insertion around, so what normally happens if this is your pelvis and this is your leg, they pull your leg out to the side. If we keep the leg stuck on the ground, they stop that other side of your pelvis dropping down. So imagine you're hopping on one leg and you've got the whole weight of the whole half of your body sticking on this side. They're working really, really hard to stop that happening. And you will see it in kids that aren't particularly strong, in kids that are growing like weeds, or kids that are fatigued and tired. Muscles on the inside are your adductor muscles. So these guys also work in that balance between tipping side to side. There's a lot of them. There's a massive amount of muscles within your adductor compartment. They help with flexing your hip, they help with extending your hip. But there's very few people that you'll find that are weak through their adductors. What you may find more often than not is people use these guys in place of their abductors or in place of their hamstrings, and you'll get people that'll have what's called pubic overload syndrome. Common enough in Gaelic sports players, Aussie rules players, soccer players. Last lot I want to have a look at is your external rotator muscles, which this isn't drawn to scale. So you can see that pelvis is considerably bigger than that one. And that one's even smaller than that one. These guys are relatively small, and for the amount of work they have to do for an Irish dancer, they're tiny. So being held in an externally rotated position, those muscles are working really, really tight and have to work really, really hard. They're going to fatigue far quicker than hip flexors, than glute max, things like that. So we need to work on those specifically, and we need to get dancers to understand how to use these. This is the other thing. We talked before about squashing feet, twisting knees to get turnout position. giving people that understanding of, okay, this is where you feel things when you are turning out from the hip is super important. Looking at the knee, we've got a couple of things here, and it's the biggest load-bearing joint in our body. It's very, very big. It's a modified hinge, so it'll bend and flex and extend. It has a little bit of rotation as well, and dancers will try and utilize this rotation when they're trying to turn their foot out. Get away with it for a while. Keep putting load through it. Your knee has a locked and an unlocked position. When your knee is straight, it's in a locked position. The idea of that is to reduce the amount of muscle contraction required to stay upright. If you're trying to twist your knees outwards, you work against that locking mechanism and you'll potentially cause pain within the knee. We'll talk a little bit about, or Roisin talked a little bit about last week with the traction apophysitis. So you're looking at Osgood-Schlatter's syndrome, Sinding-Larsen-Johansson syndrome down here. These are probably the two biggest knee things that you'll see, or I'll see coming into clinic. Mostly with boys, occasionally you'll see it in girls. Looking at muscles up through the thigh, so Irish dancers have all got good quads. This is the bread and butter muscle for Irish dance. This guy here, rectus femoris, has two jobs. It will flex your hip, so it'll kick your leg forward. It'll also extend your knee. So it'll straighten your leg and then kick it up. So it gets used massively in high kicks. Regularly enough, you'll get someone that'll strain them just from pure overload. So this is if you've got someone doing 63 million high clicks, this is the guy that lets go. If you're looking at your adolescent male dancers, that muscle getting worked like absolute crazy, it attaches to the kneecap, which brings into your Sinding-Larsen-Johansson, Osgood-Schlatter stuff. Looking at the back of the thigh, we've got our hamstring muscles. Need to be functionally flexible. Roisin again talked last week about we push, or we have previously, and a lot of sports have, push flexibility like crazy. I'd be very much of the mindset that you need to be as flexible as you need to be. So a lot of middle distance runners now are actually reducing the amount of particularly hamstring flexibility work they're doing now, because it actually reduces the strength of a muscle to have it ridiculously long and longer than is required. Irish dancers need to be flexible through their hamstrings, but they also need to be very, very strong through them. Easiest way I'll put this to a dancer is, yep, you've got to be able to kick your leg up there, but you've also got to be able to bring it back down again. If you kick a leg up, so you're using all these muscles on the front, and you're kicking up this rubbish, weak, elastic band of a hamstring, the likelihood of you straining that is far higher than if that's a healthy, robust, strong hamstring. Making these things stronger will not make them shorter. Actually the opposite. If we get you doing the right exercises, you'll actually get strength and length, which is the optimal combination. And we'll look at that when we start looking at hip hinges and stuff shortly. Looking at the lower leg, where a lot of traumatic injuries within Irish dance are found. Also overuse injuries. You get some shin problems, foot problems, there's an unending number of them. And it makes sense when you see the complicated nature of the anatomy of your foot. There's lots and lots of bones in there, there's hundreds of ligaments, there's a bunch of muscles that don't even make it onto this list that are actually within your foot. Big guys that we're looking at in Irish dancers are gastrocnemius, and the gastrocnemius gets all the love in running, in physio in general, and strength and conditioning when it comes to jumping type of stuff. Gastrocnemius is kind of the showboat. So what he does is he stays relatively, he contracts, hangs onto the top of your Achilles, and then allows your Achilles to be used like a big elastic band. When we're looking at the stuff that is force generating, we're looking at this guy underneath, which is your soleus, which is actually bigger than your gastroc. It just doesn't show up as much as your gastroc. So your gastroc's a big show-off guy. Soleus, massive, massive muscle. It's deep to it. Does huge amounts of the heavy lifting. We've also got your tibialis posterior at the back here, and your long toe flexors. All of those muscles need to be extremely strong in terms of their ability to generate power, but also looking at the health of your Achilles and the tendons that pass through from those muscles onto the bones. all those tendons are being used as elastic bands to catapult dancers back up into the air. So it's super important that we look after both the tendon and the muscle. We'll show you how to do that as we go. Looking now at working across the lifespan. So start with some really simple strength and conditioning principles. We talk about the FIT principle, which is frequency, intensity, time and type. And this is something that for every strength and conditioning session you do with your athletes or with your dancers, or the person that's doing them with you, they need to be able to explain to you, okay, or you need to be able to explain frequency. How many of these am I doing in terms of how many am I actually going to lift today? How often am I going to lift this week? Intensity. How hard is this going to be? Am I lifting 200 kilos off the ground, or am I doing a bunch of neurological work where I'm only going to lift a relatively lightweight a couple of times because I'm 9? Time. How long am I going to spend doing this stuff? How much rest am I going to get in between each set? How long is this session going to last, and how long is this program going to last for? And type. What am I going to do? Am I lifting weights? Am I doing plyometric work or jumping work? Have I built the strength to do that plyometric work? Is it strength work? Is it conditioning work? Because these are two very different things, and that brings us on to the next thing, is that the world of strength and conditioning has exploded in the last few years, and they talk about coaches that might be a big S small c or a big C small s, or their strength and conditioning. So what we talk about with strength and conditioning, S, strength, it's strength building. Conditioning is physiological change, so you're trying to work on someone's aerobic system, anaerobic system. When Roshin goes on to talk about periodization, the size of that S and that C can change over a season or over a year. So you might be at the start of the year, ideally, you would actually go big S, smaller C. So this might be before you even go back dancing. Kids have got a little bit of strength work to do. That doesn't have to be going to the gym and throw the weights around like a lunatic. It might be in your time off. You're going to do some kid stuff. Go off and get a little bit stronger. Go and play basketball. Go and do whatever. Here's a couple of exercises that I want you to do, and we'll give you some really basic stuff you can play with today. Once you get into somewhere where you're doing a little bit more, or you're doing a lot more dance, that S component might shrink down a bit. You're still touching strength work, you're still maintaining strength work, but the conditioning side of things comes up, and that conditioning may be specific to dance, or it may be specific to another part of training, cross training, for example. Or you might need a balanced strength and conditioning outlook on things. But I think having that understanding of what strength and conditioning means. Conditioning side of things tends to be just given lip service. It's like, oh yeah, it's S&C. And it's not, it's just all strength. So it needs to be, if you're doing it or whoever you're working with, are they big S, small c? What's the size of the conditioning components, and where does it fit within your yearly plan? And that's super important. We're going to have a look at what and when now. So what sort of stuff should dancers be doing, and when should they be doing it? If we're looking at pre-pubertal kids, so this is generally before the age of 10 in girls and before the age of 12 in boys, on average. Some kids mature before, some kids mature later. Definitely with contact sports anyway, you will find that at a younger age, the kids that mature earlier get picked for representative teams. They tend to peak early. Now, that may be the case in Irish dance as well. It may also be that kids that mature earlier will undergo a lot of the problems that the next group we're going to talk about will undergo. So where it's 10 and 12, don't get hung up on it being it's just 10 or it's just 12. It needs to be, righto, where are they in stages of maturation? So it's out on average, it's 10 and 12, but it's not, there's any average is built on a bell curve, so you've got kids on either end of that curve. During this time, they're growing constantly, and the human body loves that. Getting a little bit bigger, nice and slow and steady, happy out. Their nervous system, their musculoskeletal system is able to adapt to nice, regular, constant change. Happy days. The emphasis here, and this is taken from, again, long-term athletic development stuff, I'm hugely aware that Irish dancers peak in terms of competition far earlier than the vast majority of other sports people. They also do start their sport generally a lot earlier than most other sports kids do. So the reason we talk about sort of this pre-pubertal age group being set up for fundamental skills and basic movement skills is that it's a real time for an increase in neurological growth and pruning of neurons. So in terms of honing skills, we actually are better at it at this time. It's a really, really good time to groove movement patterns. So for dance, yep, it's brilliant. But it's also really, really good for working on strength and conditioning patterns. So if you're looking at simple stuff, squat patterns, lunge patterns, that sort of stuff, really, really good. The other thing you can do, it's really cool for just unstructured movement. So much of any particular sport is, here is a certain way of moving that you're going to do all the time. Take advantage of things like warm-ups to do unstructured movement. Do a bunch of bear crawls, do some lizard walks, some inchworms, some running around chasing the ball, just some stuff that's not structured. Allow them to explore movement. It's really, really important, and you'll find that kids will, given that little bit of expression of movement and discovery of movement, the giddiness tends to go out of them a bit, and it's like, right, cool, now we're back into our groove. They'll switch back into that a lot quicker. I love this picture. 2-year-old kids are the greatest exponents of squats on earth. And I think the reason for that is their head is a quarter of their body. So you're basically a chopper. And if you go to squat and a quarter of your body gets too far forward or too far back, you'll fall down. So what the kid works out very, very quickly is, if I want to get myself close to the ground, I have to keep my center of mass inside my base of support. And that's what it looks like. And it's absolutely phenomenal. What would be a really nice challenge is for everyone watching this to try this and get down and look as good as he is. I would suggest that the vast majority of people can't do it. It may be because we've all spent a lot of time sitting in chairs. Where you will see this regularly out of an 85-year-old man is in China. Sitting waiting for a bus, squatted down like that. The reason for that is that from a sanitation perspective, they use squat toilets in China. If you can't squat down, you can't go to the toilet. And they get to practice it a couple of times a day. So it's in us, we've got it, it's just that we don't use it, and that's why we end up moving in as poor a way as we do. If we look into an older group now, we get onto your sort of early puberty kids. So this is, again, 10 to 14 in girls, 12 to 16 in guys. We talk about this time of peak height velocity. So this is where you absolutely explode in terms of growth. I would implore you to measure your kids for height. Measure them every couple of months. It takes nothing. Tape measure on the wall. You can do what's called sitting height and standing height. So standing height's standard height. Sitting height is you measure seat them on a chair, measure the height of the chair, and then measure the height they are from the ground seated, and you subtract the height of the chair from the sitting height. There's a bunch of cool Excel spreadsheets you can get that you plug those numbers in, and you can actually work out reasonably accurately when these peak height velocity times will occur. Also takes into account, you're going to measure mum and dad and things like that. But if you can track someone's growth and they're in that nice steady progress, and then they go whack 2 centimeters taller, that starts ringing alarm bells. It doesn't mean they have to stop dancing, but we need to know where they are. This is the trick. Puberty's a great time to take advantage of getting stronger. Everybody gets stronger through puberty. Guys get a little bit, the disparity in strength goes up when with males, purely because they've got a whole bunch of cool hormones floating around the place that build muscle. So both girls and guys get stronger through puberty. Guys just get stronger at a greater rate. The thing that I can't emphasize enough is that growth is a load. If you have a pubescent kid sitting in front of you, they are working hard sitting still. If they're also trying to study and dance and do everything else, they're going to run out of gas. So it is a time of finding out where they are on the growth curve, acknowledging the fact that they are now bigger and stronger than they were before, acknowledging the fact that they're working hard, and also acknowledge the fact that half of them haven't got a clue where their limbs are anymore. So it's a time for you to be patient and for them to also be patient. They are Bambi. And you'll have all seen it, the kids who come back after summer and then they're 4.5 foot taller than they were. Their pants don't fit them anymore. If they're a male, they keep walking into the doorway because their shoulders are now 1.5 inches wider than they were this time last year. So it's really tempting to go, cool, he's bigger, he's stronger, look at him, we can really rip in here now. And it's quite easy to actually kick someone off into a Osgood Slatters, Severs, that sort of stuff. Or if we hit things too hard, their performance will go out the window because neurologically they're just not as intact as they were before. The picture of their body is 6 months out of date. They need time to actually work out where stuff is. They need time to embed that and their new strength and tie that new strength to the new size of their body. They will fly if we're a bit patient with people. Looking at some general training considerations. This is some stuff that I'm very passionate about, and it's where we talk about flexibility. If you've got insane range of motion, you've got to own it. So if you've got a leg that you can put up, if you can grab it and pull it up over your head, then there's no reason why you can't put it up there with the muscles that do that. Really important as far as I'm concerned, purely because if you have uncontrolled range of motion, you are opening that up to being injured. This is where we talked about the graph shortly. The idea of not flogging a dead horse. So what we have are dancers who lift, not lifters who dance. So if you're dancing your athletes a lot and they're going off to strength and conditioning, is that strength and conditioning day being used or is being taken away from being a recovery day? Because if it is, you're robbing your dancer of a day's rest that is going to rob them in terms of performance of dance later in the week. I understand that everyone has a very busy schedule, but to me, looking at strength and conditioning, it's always an addition to the dance side of things. You may have to pull back some dance if you want to increase someone's strength and conditioning work, and that's again part of your planning. A lot of people will have seen this inverted U graph looking at performance and arousal. So there's an optimal amount of arousal, how fired up you can be to perform well. And there's something that I'd like to replace arousal with fatigue. And looking at within a class, you warm up, you dance, you go through a bunch of stuff, and the dancer gets the absolute peak of what they're doing. We'll go once more round, fine. We'll go once more round, fine. They keep that level. Then they start to get tired, and then the class gets louder, and then their performance starts to drop. Everything after that, no matter how much you instruct them, coerce them, do whatever you possibly can, they are not going to get better, and they are practicing doing things worse. Every good athlete that I've worked with in the past, you watch good coaches and they will come in, work away, you start to see that drop in performance. If a couple of barks doesn't make a difference, right, cool, call it there, because you're not going to get them back. And it may be just a pause, give them a break, give them a rest. They come back, they go again, brilliant. I completely understand there is a need to overload people to change their physiology. It just can't be every session. And at the end of the day, we talked about optimal training for performance. Performance is key. You're not tested on who's got the biggest engine in dancing. It's who performs the best on the day. So if you're getting people to practice things badly, you are teaching them to do things that you don't want them to do when they're on stage. Righto, we're going to do some exercises. And I am going to change over this to that one. And hopefully you've got a hold of me there with just my melon on the screen. Okay, I've got a bunch of exercises I'm going to roll through. What we might do before that though is, if anyone's got any questions, throw them up on the live chat here. Hopefully this is working. If not, no problems, we'll answer anything later on at the end. We'll leave that up for a minute or so. What we're going to do, as I said, I've got a lot of questions here, a lot of exercises here. I'm going to work through a few key concepts to start with that will explain rationale as to why I do some of the stuff I do, and then also give you a few things to play with when you're back in class. And all this stuff you can factor into from a strength and conditioning perspective. How they perform the movements is far more important to what weight they lift or things like that. There's any idiot can chuck a stack of weight on a bar and start throwing that around, or jumping around with it. If you're not moving well, you're wasting your time. The exercises that we're going to go through have a rationale behind them and a reasoning as to why we do it. So I'm just going to throw this one, which should be a bigger screen. I'm going to pull this out. Now, the first thing to look at is, and it's something that everyone does, is a squat. And you're sitting there going, I've been sitting here for 50 minutes and you're showing me how to squat. What's the point of that? I'm going to tie in some of the hip anatomy that we were talking about earlier into how we squat. So we can look at those 6 degrees of movement that a hip has, and with that use all the control of all 6 of those whilst doing one exercise. So what you're going to start off with is your feet parallel. This drives, and get up, don't just sit there, get up and move, because I want you to be able to feel this. It's really, really important as a teacher. If you're going to ask someone to do something, particularly in terms of, you don't have to pick up 100 kilos, but if you understand what we're talking about with rotations and things like that, it's far easier to teach it. So that whole, watch it, do it, teach it sort of thing. So, see one, do one, teach one. That's what we're kind of looking at here. So there's a rationale behind why we get you to do this with your feet parallel, and it's to do with control of the rotation of your hip. So if I start like this, I'm already jammed into maximum external rotation, and I can actually internally rotate my hips to squat in a way that we don't want it. So we're going to torment you by having your feet point forward. What you're then going to do is you're going to try and turn your knees out. I stand a bit higher on this side. So you're going to keep your feet flat on the floor. You're going to think of the ball of your big toe, the ball of your little toe, and your heel. Those 3 points are all flat on the floor, and you're going to turn your knees out. So you find your arches will come up. So hey presto magico, you've made some orthotics already. Look at that. You're not clawing your toes into the ground, but you will feel these muscles here firing up. And if you go from that relaxed position to turning your knees out, you'll feel those small rotators of your hip switching on. So we're already working those muscles just by standing still, which is brilliant. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at what our back's doing. Standing there normally, you've got a curve in your back. That needs to stay there. Looking at other strength and conditioning stuff, yes, we can get some curvature in our back later on. At the moment, we're looking about how we move and making things a little bit more contrived. So standing there, you should have a curve in your back. That stays there. That does not change. Next bit of the equation is going to be to bow forward. What you'll feel is your hamstrings will tighten up, and you'll feel your weight goes onto your heels a bit more. What this brings in is your glutes and your hamstrings into the exercise, versus doing that, which is very Irish dancing in. It's not bad to do this. It's just that you're already doing a stack of this. What we're looking at doing is going, hey, let's bring these other guys to the party. So, feet parallel, knees turned out, back nice and neutral, bend from your hips, and then you're going to bend your knees. And what you'll find is that you'll kind of feel like you want to fall backwards. And what you might find is as you come up, you step back. As far as I'm concerned, that's actually perfect. I would much rather see someone come up and fall backwards, because what that has told me is that you're using your glutes and they're kicking you back this way. What I don't particularly want to see is that, because that's you've jumped onto your quads, used what you like, and jumped forward. Really, really simple, and it takes a lot of brain work to do it, but you're controlling for rotation, flexion, extension, because you've got 2 feet on the ground, you're kind of controlling for adduction, abduction. But what you can also look at in that control this way and that is, are you going straight up and down? So feet parallel, knees turned out, back neutral, hips back, bend your knees. If you notice that you're getting that, or you're getting that, it may be that you're just loading one leg up more than the other, or these muscles on this side are weak and they're letting you drop out through there. So watch where someone's bum goes, boof, straight down, straight back up again. That's what you're looking for. Really, really nice assessment, for want of a better term, of how someone moves through their whole lower limb chain. If you want to get trickier with the side-to-side stuff and hip, do it on the single leg. So again, foot straight forward, knee turned out, back neutral, bend from your bum, bend from your hip, bend your knee. Hips stay level. What you don't want to see is that hanging out here. Or what some people do if they know that you don't want their hips sticking out, is they'll stack their body over it. They'll go, yeah, look at this, my hips are flat, but I've just stacked my entire body over that leg. So you should be able to cantilever the weight of this leg and half your body off this hip. No problems at all. Really, really simple. So that's world's most basic exercise, the squat. But we kind of physioified it and used the anatomy that we now know to assess and look at and train the muscles that we need to do to dance. And using glutes and hamstrings, which are muscles that we don't probably use enough, to get them trained up. Single leg, we're looking at abduction control, and we can progress that on shortly. Something else, again, that people are already probably doing is things like Romanian deadlifts or single leg Romanian deadlifts, and that's to do with what we talked about already, that hip hinge. So Romanian deadlift is pretty much the first half of that squat. So legs, knees soft, feet pointing forward, knees turned out, bending from your hip, and you bend forward. This is why I was never a dancer. As far as your hamstrings will let you. Hold weights in your hands if you want, and then come back up nice and tall. So what you're getting here is what we call an eccentric contraction of your hamstrings. So your hamstrings are getting longer, but they're also contracting. So they're working like brakes to slow the descent that you go at. And then they're working concentrically, which is shortening and contracting, to pull you back up again. This is a strength flexibility exercise. It is awesome for dancers. We talked before about owning the range of motion that you have. I got guys that are insanely flexible, that are doing Romanian deadlifts standing on a box holding a weight, because they can actually get their bar past their feet and come back up. That is some serious ownership of range of motion, which is absolutely brilliant. Looking at, we can then progress that onto a single leg RDL. So same sort of deal, just with on one leg. And what I'll always be picky about is that leg at the back has to go back straight. A lot of dancers I'll find will try and do that, because you're crazily using these adductor muscles to try and stabilize stuff. Where we want, instead of that adductor kicking in to keep you balanced and throw everything over that leg, we're actually going, right, let's hang off this hip, and that's what holds you up. So simple tips like that, and guarantee it. I'm assuming everyone's going off to do video classes from this week or last week or whenever kids finish their Easter holidays. Really simple. Everyone's getting squats, RDLs, deadlifts, single leg RDLs thrown at them. Know why you do stuff, know what the corrections for things are, know what the tips are, and you get so much more of an advantage out of doing those exercises and having someone doing this and all they're doing is overdriving their adductors even more. They're not going to get any stronger through here. You're going to get them hopping on one foot and they're going to be like this, which I don't know Irish dance, but I know that's not good for it. We're going to look at some more lower limb stuff. So, I've just talked about these exercises, about these guys, and there's a couple of exercises that are worth playing with. One is a control exercise, one is a strengthening exercise. Two are a strengthening exercise. First one is, and I've got to give credit to a former professor of mine, Bill Vincenzino in Queensland, who came up with this exercise. It's called a brolga. Google it. It's a white and red crane bird that lives in Australia that stands on one leg all the time. Really cool exercise. and it's giving you a real good understanding of that hip rotation again. Super simple. You're going to have one foot standing on one foot, other foot back for balance. Again, not crossed over like this. Back here on your big toe. It's there just purely for balance. When you get good at it, you can do this without your foot on the ground. I want you using that leg for balance. I don't want you hanging onto a chair. It's external and it's too hard to actually rotate properly. Use that foot to balance. What you're then going to do, put your hands on your hips, and you've got like two headlights pointing straight forward. All you're going to do is you're going to keep that knee pointed over your middle three toes. Ideally, you've got a mirror in front of you, or you can be looking down. It's up to you, but mirror is usually better because it keeps your head up, keeps you nice and tall. All we're then going to work on is those headlights are pointing straight forward. We're going to keep that knee over those toes, and we're going to turn about 30 degrees to the opposite direction, and then come back. And what you'll feel is those rotators at your hip are really, really working. What you want to avoid is your toes clawing like crazy, like I'm doing. Rotating. It is only about 30 to 40 degrees. Beyond that, you have to twist your knee around because you just run out of range of motion at your hip. But I'd be looking at relatively small numbers of these in terms of repetitions per set, purely because it's big neurological challenge. It's hard work. Your brain's working harder than anything. These aren't physically particularly difficult, but it's that idea of, okay, working out how things are moving. 5 on one side, 5 on the other, 5 times, something like that. But it's that, get it right first. The numbers, yes, they're important to get enough done, but you don't have to go flogging yourself to death doing it wrong. Again, the right thing is the right thing, and practicing the right thing is what we need to do. Looking at some more strengthening stuff for those muscles on the side of your hip. We've got a simple hip hitch, and I'll do it this way. What you're going to do is you're going to pop your foot on a chair or a couch, and you're going to come back into it. You're going to stretch up to the ceiling. Same leg that's up on the chair is going up to the ceiling. And all you're going to do is reach to the ceiling, pulling that hip with it. So these muscles on this side are pulling and contracting and throwing the other hip upwards, and then bringing you back down again. These guys are working really, really hard. Hip hitch. So this is the muscle. So essentially, I'll do it without a chair. Let's test me. Doing that. These are the muscles that are controlling things when you're hopping on one foot, keeping you nice and level, and not that. Another exercise that we can work on there, and anyone who has been to see me, they'll generally all get given this. You'll see people will do squats with bands around their knees, or will do crab walks or X-band walks with bands around their knees. And there's a bunch of research that's come out reasonably recently that's shown that doing them this way, I don't care how you do them. It's important to me that you just do them. And don't do them barefoot. This band will rip the living daylights out of the side of your feet, but I'll take the hit for today. Yeah, doing them this way recruits a little bit more of these muscles than doing them around your knees and things like that. The other thing I like about this is, particularly for dancers, what the band is trying to do is pull your feet in that way. So we have to be working our external rotators whilst we're working our abductors, which to me is more bang for our buck, which is really, really cool. What you're aiming at here, and again, it's feet pointing forward. Dancers aren't massive fans of this, but I'm working on human beings first of all. So what we're going to work on is slight bend your knees, slight bend your hips. You're not squatted down here because you can't dance like that. You need to be up relatively tall. And all you're going to do is lift your foot, step out, lift it and step back in. And what you want to maintain is nice level hips, and you need to be the boss. So the trick with this is that the band doesn't come whipping in. You don't use the carpet to help you out, and you don't seesaw your way along here. So you might have guessed I'm very picky with how I get people to move, because it's important. As teachers, you guys are very picky with how people move. So with strength and conditioning, it's the same thing. It's a skill first, then it's loaded. So This is where, if we're looking at our prepubescent kids, most of them are probably going to be really good at squatting, and the ones that aren't, well, you need to train them. But you need to be touching on those patterns. If they're doing a lunge or a split squat, again, same sort of stuff that you're worried about when you're doing squats. That knee's not diving in here, they're not kicking their bum out that way, they're not a wobbly noodle through the middle here. Which brings us, I suppose, onto our next thing, which is his core exercises. And I really don't like the plank, because in terms of a static plank, you never do it. It's unless you want to be the world plank champion, and I think the world record the fella just broke it is 8 hours or something bonkers like that. For me, Roshan mentioned the other week, doing dynamic planks or a 3-point plank or a 2-point plank, something as simple as, so plank position, woof, woof, woof. That way you're getting muscles switching on and off. Yep, they're still maintaining your core through here, crawl around, all that sort of stuff. It's far more functional. Other thing is, you're getting muscle switching on and off, which happens when you're dancing. The other thing is you're breathing. If you're doing a plank, you're eventually going to hold your breath, which will be fine for about 2.5 minutes till you turn blue and fall down. So the trick is, like, you look at an Irish dancer, they should be like a swan. Nice and steady up top and legs going like Blue Fury. If you're practicing a plank and you're not moving, well, how are you testing or challenging your musculature around your middle, connecting your upper half to your body, the lower half, if you're not moving your legs? So a simple 3-point plank, 2-point plank. You can get really, really difficult with this sort of stuff. If you're there and you're trying to go same arm, same leg, that's hard work. But I'll always work on a couple seconds at a time, maximum, or a second. Or you get a bunch of people down in that position in a circle. Have a couple of tennis balls, a couple of soccer balls, depending on how coordinated the kids are. Have them thrown them to one another, stopping the balls. Make it fun. Like, it's the idea of just, let's see who can do the longest plank is, yeah, great, but to me, it's not functional. It doesn't replicate what you're trying to do. And if anything, to me, it actually goes against what we're trying to do with people. So we're trying to make people adaptable and move really, really well, or we're just training there as stiffening them up, getting people as stiff through the middle as possible. What the risk you run there is that people actually lose the ability to move their backs, which I suppose brings us on to our next thing, which is like another really, really basic exercise, a cat-cow, depending on what your agricultural background is. If we're looking at a cat-cow, so most people, it's this. And you bend all through your lumbar spine, it won't bend anywhere else. If you pop down on your hands and knees, you pop your hands under your shoulders, your knees under your hips, so you're like a box. What you're then going to do, if the aim of this exercise is to get you to move all of your spine through as big a range of motion as you've got. So what we're looking at to start with is we're going to get you to tuck your hips under. Imagine someone's trying to kick you in the backside. What you're then going to do is arch your lower back, arch your upper back, and drop your head down. Next bit is a tricky bit. Your arms stay straight. You drop your body between your shoulder blades. So you can think about pulling your shoulder blades together, but you don't need to because gravity will drop you down there. The next bit's the hard bit. And most of us, particularly once you're a bit more grown up or you spend a bit of time at a desk, you'll be really, really stiff through your thoracic spine. What you're going to try to do is, so you drop down here, your chest is pointing towards the floor. What you're then going to try and do is bring your chest to point forward. And you'll feel it through your thoracic spine. What you don't want to do is go and drop out through your lumbar spine. That's the bit that moves that we're happy to move. Keep that one flexed. Try and bring your thoracic spine through. You'll know it won't feel like much fun. What you're then going to do is let your lower back drop and then stick your bum out. So that we work on flexing our lumbar spine, flexing our thoracic spine, flexing our cervical spine, dropping down to reduce some of or to enable us to extend our thoracic spine. Bring your head up, bring your thoracic spine through, bring your lumbar spine through. So that all you're doing is moving your back. It's almost embarrassing calling it an exercise, but I guarantee you if you try it now, particularly if you're a grown-up, your thoracic spine will be going, I'm not a big fan of this. do 15 or 20 of them, your range of motion, particularly in that flexion side of things, will get massive. Like you might find that you do the first one, like, oh, Jesus, this is horrible. Don't try and push your spine out through your back. Let the 10th repetition have you this much higher than the first one. Don't go first repetition, you go, I'm going to get this up. By getting you to go through multiple repetitions, it's what increases range of motion. So your soft tissues will get extensible, and you'll be able to get more range of motion out of it that way. I'm going to get you doing 2 more exercises. I'm hoping that we're going to come back and do another one of these that enables us to go into this with a bit more detail, particularly talking about load and things like that. But to start with, just getting you doing these basic exercises correctly first is super important. I'm going to show you 2 other exercises. First one is a bridge. Single leg bridge, or double leg bridge first of all. That again is multiple, you can scale it in a bunch of different ways. I want to make this hamstring heavy. So you throw anyone on the ground and go do a bridge, and they'll be here, particularly if they're a dancer, and they'll do this all day long. Because it's bum and loads of quads. I want your knees out at greater than 90 degrees. Try it there, even on 2 legs, you'll feel your hamstrings are working. This is about balancing out your athlete. If you've got someone who's training really, really hard in class, and you want them to do some strength and conditioning on top of stuff, stop throwing them off to get weighted jump squats done and all that sort of stuff and blowing up the muscles that are already getting worked during class. That stuff's appropriate at the appropriate time. If you're in heavy training with dancing, you're just robbing people of recovery. But if you want to give them a little bit of a needle with some strength and conditioning work, pick on stuff that's not getting worked so hard. This is a really nice one. To make this a little bit more difficult, leg out straight, keep it straight, lift it 5 centimeters off the ground. Again, what you do with your arms is actually important. You'll see everyone will do this and dig their elbows into the ground and help themselves up. Cross your hands across your chest, keep them off the ground. That way it's all through your leg. That's what it looks like through there. From the other side, working up through there. And you'll feel it straight away in your hamstrings. If that's too easy for people, chair, boom, leg there, and up you go through a bigger range. Really, really challenging. I will give every dancer that comes in the challenge of 3 sets of 20 of those on 1 leg. Purely because if I get you to do them with your leg bent on your quads, not a problem. You'll be able to do that all day long. So to me, having that as a challenge, it's just looking at balancing people out, getting strength through length, and having front of your leg and back of your leg as balanced as we possibly can. Last one I'm going to show you today, and it requires a simple but very, very effective piece of equipment, and there's a lot of science behind this. Sounds cracked, but here's a metronome. Get a metronome up if you haven't got a metronome at home. Reasoning behind this is it enables you to have focused attention on what you're doing. A lot of strength and conditioning is to do with time under tension. So if we're looking at calf work, we talked before, and I'm standing in a really bad spot, we talked before about working on the muscular component and the tendinous component. Today we're going to talk just about the muscular component and how we've got a bunch of muscles that need to get us up onto our toes. You've got to be strong, and you've got to be able to do repeated high load efforts, hops, jumps, clicks, all that stuff. Landing is massive. What we look at is, and I'll throw this on, is to get someone, set the metronome at 60 beats a minute. So you can use a clock if you want, but they need to be able to hear it. And generally what I'll get people to do is 2 seconds up, I need something to balance with, 1 second hold, 2 seconds back down again. 2 seconds up, hold, 2 seconds back down. And I'd aim for 3 sets of 25. So anyone that comes into me as a runner gets given that. The ticking stuff is really, really good, and it sounds bizarre for people with tendon problems. Does some stuff to your brain, but it makes people focus on how they move. So if you're looking at 1, 2 up, 1 second hold, 1, 2 back down. So we've got the concentric phase on the way up, eccentric phase on the way back down again. We're looking at 5 seconds per repetition. So we're looking at a large amount of time under tension. Time under tension is directly proportional to gain in strength. 3 by 25 is hard work. Single leg, so 25 one side, 25 on the other by 3. If you look at it, 75 repetitions, which appears a lot. The way I'll explain it to a runner is that if you want to go and run a kilometre, you're looking at somewhere between 750 and 900 steps. So you're looking at somewhere 350 to 450 hops on one leg. And I'm asking you 75 of 1 times your body weight. When you run, it's 4 to 6 times your body weight go instantaneously through your leg. So, and the rates of force absorption in Irish dance go through the roof beyond that sort of stuff. So, yes, it's a high demand, but at the same time, it's what's required through what people are doing in dance. I've thrown a bunch of stuff at you today, guys. I've got more, but I'm not going to give you any more purely because you've been sitting there for God knows how long, an hour and a quarter. It's a long time. If there's any questions, throw them up in the chat at the moment. If you're shy and don't want it to come up or whatever else, happy to send us a message to the Complete Dancer Project. We'll answer all and anything that you've got. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's been fun. This has been our first attempt at this, so I hope it went alright, and I hope things have worked and you've heard things and all that sort of stuff. As I said, if there's any questions at all, by all means send them on. Good, bad or indifferent. I've enjoyed today, guys, and thanks for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.